Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery preparing to check in on a couple red wiggler worm composting systems that are 70 days of age today. And they're the systems that have red wigglers living in yellow buckets. Red and yellow makes orange, that's why I wore this shirt. So they're right here in front of me, and we've somehow gotten into a pattern of giving them their feeding exactly every 2 weeks. These systems were launched with no food in them, so the worms were actually left without food, only the fresh bedding that made up the systems for their first 2 weeks in service. And then at 2 weeks of age, they got their first feeding, and ever since then we've been maintaining the exact 2-week interval between feedings. So at 2 weeks they got feeding 1, at 4 weeks they got feeding 2, at 6 weeks they got feeding 3, at 8 weeks came feeding number 4, and today at 10 weeks, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 weeks, 70 days of age, we're once again coming back at the 2-week interval. And I don't know, it does almost seem like a coincidence. I didn't really plan it that way, but it just seems to be working out that way. And sometimes once it starts to create a pattern like that, I can't seem to resist helping it continue further. But this was definitely just, me shuffling, check-in days on my schedule around. Like, for example, the systems that I'm checking in with tomorrow aren't being checked on tomorrow just because that's how they fell on the schedule. Naturally, it's because they're hitting a milestone age tomorrow, so that's why they got shuffled in and out of the schedule. Sometimes I've been shuffling my schedule around to try to reach greater intervals between feedings, and in some cases I've gone 3 weeks now. 3 weeks on my 2 larger systems, the outdoor worm bag and the indoor vermibag mini. So now I guess my main curiosity here today was pertaining to gourds, because during recent check-ins, we've just kind of come in here, given them their feedings, and somehow our encounters with the gourds were completely overlooked. Perhaps mainly because most of the chunks of the gourd that remain here in bucket number 3, these are buckets number 3 and 4, by the way. So here in bucket number 3, it did seem like the chunks of gourd that still remain were pretty fragmented already. And here's 2 pieces of it. And last time I think we only encountered 1, but today I figured now I would see what I could do as far as tracking some of it down. And here's a 3rd piece, because it was so curious to me when we got into bucket 4 over there after feeding bucket 3, packing things up and heading over there, and then finding this big piece of gourd, reminding us that gourds were in these systems, but it seems so unusual to have not found any while doing a pretty thorough check-in on that occasion. This is a banana stem. Yeah, it just seems so unusual that, wow, what happened to all that gourd? And it's still here in a few larger sized chunks. I'm sure there's a good many of them that I'm simply missing to my sort of quickie inspection of the material, but it did seem like it would be interesting to see if I can unearth a few pieces, and it seems like I just found the largest piece of them all. It's got these ribs on it that sort of give it this extra thickness and strength, and it's just amazing how this stuff is crumbling as I bump into it. My pinky finger bumped into it and a whole bunch of it just chipped right off. Oopsie. Right there. Just from the slightest little rub. So, once we get over to bucket 4, we'll find a much larger chunk of gourd. I think a couple large chunks of gourd. It was just that in here we were dealing with a smaller gourd that is now actually in its final stages. If things keep crumbling that easily, every time I bump into it, it shatters. Well, that's cool. Soon we won't even be able to recognize chunks of this stuff as gourd anymore. So I attempted to position them kind of in the middle there, and this way maybe we'll be able to encounter more of them in one felt swoop next time we come in here and see a couple of them and not get so caught up in trying to check in on them and monitor them so much. But the only reason I was interested in checking gourds in bin number, or bucket 4 here, was just the unusual way we managed to go through an entire feeding a couple check-ins ago without even encountering any, or at least probably encountering a good many, but not realizing it. So I was going to go kind of light on bedding today, and the topper was going to be a whole bunch of lovely leaves like what we had out here on the top when I first came in here. But my tilling around was also kind of meant to blend in a lot of the leafy matter that had been just resting out on the top surface here. So that was kind of nice too. We found gourds, we blended in leaves, and now we can proceed to giving them their meal. I already gave them the coffee portion, but look at all these fruits. It's banana, cantaloupe, strawberry. I don't even know what else is in here. It might just be those items, but those are all things that I think the worms are going to appreciate. And there's a good bit of it here as well, so I don't have to be stingy. But I do have this funny feeling that we are probably going to be returning here in 2 weeks and maintaining the pattern, even though I'm not attempting to, but somehow things like that seem to fall into place on their own. Alright, to me it just feels like we've gone a little overboard on the amount of time we've spent here in bucket number 3, but you know, I usually make up for it in bucket... Oh, what is that? Big chunk of frozen food. It can just remain frozen, so... in one big heap it'll thaw out in no time, but once we get in to the first of multiple systems and I kind of sense that I know what they need and I could tell whether I've given them everything that I think they need, I'm good to go to the next one. I'm going to give the systems a little splash of water because I kind of expected there to be more moisture in here because I've been putting a lot of confidence and faith in this paper only top covering here. But you know, with the furnace running a lot these days, it does feel to me like the air in the house is much drier, and at those times of year when the furnace is running and drying the air in the house, it does seem like it does so in a way that it sucks moisture out of the air. So let's get these leaves blended in. We'll definitely be encountering a couple gourd fragments as we go, and I've already encountered one of them, so here's a piece of it. Nice and big, thick stuff. And I don't want to be too rough with it, you know. I don't know why. Grow this kind of weird attachment to it, but it seems like out of this big gourd journey, this one biggest of all the gourds is gonna, just by its nature, gonna take the longest of all of them to finally break down and vanish out of view. But since it's still such a recognizable fragment, I figured, well, let's let it stay that way for a little while longer. Talking about recognizable items, I thought that one of these buckets was where we were running the cork. We found what we thought to be the cork, and I thought we threw it into one of these systems, but I've not really pursued it much. And it always did seem to me like when we found that object that we believed to be the cork, that it might not have even been that. So I'm not all that into it. I've been more or less treating it as a completed composted item, which only took a few years to happen. So that's our little meager amount of sub-feeding bedding. And at the end, we'll give them their feeding zone indicators, and we forgot to put one into bucket 3, so we'll go back and we'll remedy that. Place a little feeding zone indicator in the form of that coffee filter to show where we last fed, as we're going to do right here in bucket 4. But before we do that, I've also got a splish splash for these guys, because it felt just the same to me here that a little moisture couldn't hurt. So let's go for it. Alrighty. Ooh, look at that little guy. Probably doesn't like the idea of being out on that piece of dry paper much. So perhaps I should shoot back in there really quick before we call it a day and get him out of there. Be careful, dude. Get in trouble that way. Alright everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now. Yep, those of you keeping track of my bloopers and blunders, I forgot to add the leaves, and guess what? It's just going to have to stay that way. Once I forget something, it's got to go that way. Oh well. Maybe next time. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.